Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Gut Reset Summit. I'm your host, Dr. John Dempster, and today I am joined by a legend in this space, JJ Virgin. And if you haven't heard about JJ, again, first of all, where have you been? But she is triple board certified in all sorts of things. She is a passionate advocate of eating and exercising smarter. JJ helps people stay fired up and healthy as they age so they feel the best that they ever have, even at the age of 40 and beyond. JJ is a prominent TV and media personality whose previous features include co-host of TLC's Freaky Eaters, 2 years as the on-camera nutritionist for weight loss challenges on Dr. Phil, and numerous appearances on PBS, Dr. Oz, Rachel Ray, Access Hollywood, and The Today Show. You might have heard of a few of those. JJ is the author of 4 New York Times bestsellers, The Virgin Diet, The Virgin Diet Cookbook, JJ Virgin's Sugar Impact Diet, and JJ Virgin's Sugar Impact Diet Cookbook. And her latest book, Warrior Mom, 7 Secrets to Bold, Brave Resilience, shows caregivers everywhere how to be strong, positive leaders for their families while exploring the inspirational lessons. JJ has learned to fight for her own son's life, and she also hosts 2 popular podcasts, Mindcast for health experts and entrepreneurs, and Ask the Health Expert, daily show for consumers with over 14 million downloads and growing. Her most important role is as mom of her 2 budding entrepreneurial young men. So JJ, that doesn't even begin to tap into all of your accolades, but thank you for being on the Gut Reset Summit today.
Well, thank you for including me.
You're very welcome. And today we're going to talk all about the power of foods and how that gets us to not only better gut health, but better overall health. But I know you have a journey, and I know we've kind of touched on a little bit in your bio. Tell us, how did you get to be such a leader in this space right now?
It was not a straight path, that's for darn sure. In fact, I think my mom was like, what on earth is it you are going to do? Are you ever going to get a job? Right. And I actually wanted to be a theater actress. So high school, I was putting myself, saved my allowance, put myself through American Conservatory Theater, was doing dance lessons and singing lessons. I started teaching dance to make extra money. But because of that, I was so focused on nutrition and fitness, because if you are performing on stage, that's your tool, right? That's your instrument. So I was super focused. I was like in the library, because that's what we had back then, reading Adele Davis, like reading all this stuff, designing my diet, designing my exercise programs. And this was literally started at age 12. This was back in the 70s. I wore leg warmers, all that. And I went off to UCLA on a theater scholarship and was so disappointed in the program there, because all they told us was, you're going to become a waitress. And I was like, why am I in college to become a waitress? This is silly. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up as an English major. And then I discovered that you could actually study nutrition and exercise, but I ran out of units. So I graduated with an English degree, and literally next day started in an exercise phys program. And then I was all the way up in a PhD program in exercise phys. And I'd run out of classes. I was taking them in the dental school at USC. And I was like, did a little class on nutrition and was like, oh, this is it. Because, back then, so many people they were coming to do exercise purely for vanity. I want to lose weight, but they didn't want to change their diet, which of course will never work. The first real needle mover is always going to be diet. So, it seems like this convoluted path. And along the way, I also catered and did chefing and kind of catered my way through college. But when you look at all of it, it all worked perfectly well. Like I write cookbooks, I do TV, I speak. And I was like, see, Mom, this all was the absolute perfect plan. It just had to come together. And I also don't have a job because I had one for 3 months and got fired. So not an employable person. So there.
The journey, obviously you've grown in and used that as your experience to grow into a tremendous leader in the nutritional space right now and beyond. And today we're going to unpack a lot about food intolerances, weight gain, the connection to gut health. What are food intolerances? How are they different than allergies? We kind of get that question all the time.
I bet. I got to tell you, John, I'm more excited about what's going on in the field of nutrition and fitness now than ever. Like, I'm more fired up now than I was 40 years ago when I was one of the first personal trainers out there. And the way that I stumbled upon the food intolerance thing was, I've always been obsessed with body composition. And I say that very specifically more than weight, because even early on, I was fortunate when I was at USC, we did a whole semester of just body composition testing. I learned how to you can manipulate every single different type of test, right? But, I was so keen on that. Like when I would go work with clients, and this was back in the 80s when we didn't have a lot of the tools we have now, I would use calipers, I'd use a tape measure. I would never just use the scale, because it's not what your weight is, it's what that weight's made up of. And I became very fascinated because my clients were all 35 plus, and a lot of them were really 45 plus to 65. And that's the zone where things go totally sideways. Let's be honest, both for men and women, because men go through andropause just like women go through menopause. And so I started to look at what could get in the way of you losing fat and cause you to gain fat. And at the time I was on Dr. Phil, and he had a chapter in his book called Weight Loss Resistance. And I was like, I love that term, And so I organized this whole course called Overcoming Weight Loss Resistance. I taught it to doctors for a couple of years. And in that course, there was a specific area where I talked about using a food sensitivity test to really help get your patients to do what you want them to do. Because as we know, when you can actually test someone, they're like, oh, it's real, right? And so I was looking at all these food sensitivity tests, and I kept seeing dairy and eggs as the top things. And like 70 to 80% of the people I tested, dairy and eggs. And I was looking at hundreds of tests, because I was doing this with doctors and looking at their patients ones, and then talking to the lab director who'd seen thousands of these. The second tier was soy, corn, and peanuts. Now, this test did not look at gluten. And as we know, gluten's a different type of test. But the gluten's the driver for making your gut more permeable that will create these food sensitivities, right? So the more food sensitivities you have, the more permeable or leaky your gut is. And gluten's a huge player in that. So is fructose, so is stress, so are a lot of different pain medications. And so I was sitting with, I was on the TLC Freaky Eaters show, and I met my co-star, had an amazing book agent. And she said, I sat down with her and I said, I want to write a book called Overcoming Weight Loss Resistance. And I'd already pitched this to 2 other agents. They're like, that won't work. Too much. She goes, you should do that food allergy thing. And I'm like, it's not a food allergy. And as you know, right, the food allergy is that immediate, it's called an IgE response. You're on the plane, the kid's got a peanut allergy, his throat closes up. You need an EpiPen. That's not what we're talking about. Those are rare. Food sensitivities are very common because we're eating the same thing all the time. If you look at the typical diet, it's gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, soy, peanuts, and sugar, right? Or artificial sweeteners over and over and over and over and over. And if your gut starts to get permeable and you're eating the same things all the time and your digestion's impaired, if you're under stressed or 35 plus and you don't have the digestive enzymes you need, those foods aren't being broken down well. Your immune system lies just below that single layer of your intestinal wall. And these little food particles get in there, and your immune system goes, what is that? That should not be here. Sees it as a foreign invader, launches out antibodies as an immune attack, grabs a hold of the proteins from that food, because that's what's causing the reaction, creates immune complexes. Now, if this is just every once in a while, your body is like Pac-Man, I dated myself, and gets rid of them. But because we're eating those same things all the time, these immune complexes build up and create all sorts of issues like joint pain and headaches and fatigue and skin problems. You start to crave the very foods that are hurting you because your body's now producing these antibodies to lie in wait. So you're like, I need the cheese, right? And one of the things that it does, and low-grade inflammation, which then creates its whole host of problems, but it also can make it hard for you to lose weight and even cause you to gain weight. So that was the whole reason I actually pulled that out and started going after it was whenever I would speak about all of these different things, people would ask about the food allergies, and I'd be like, it's not a food allergy, right? And the other reason is, for most people and anyone listening here, they want to feel better. Mm-hmm. And they've tried a lot of different things. They've been looking. They're consumers. They've already figured out that they've got a problem. They've gotten past that, like, gosh, my gut hurts, or my skin's breaking out. They've realized, hey, my skin could be related to my gut, or my headaches could be related to my gut. Then they start looking and trying different things. And there's always an issue when someone gets to that point as they're trying different things, is if they don't start to see any kind of result, they start to give up hope. They start to just get frustrated and go, this is silly. I've wasted all this time and money. Clearly, I guess this is just normal for me. And you'll even see people say, oh, that's just normal. That's you going to the bathroom every 3 days, totally normal for you. I'm like, that is not normal. No, And so one of the things that I love that happens when you approach an elimination diet, because that's all I did was rework that in this very simplified way that I put together, is the average person loses 7 pounds in the first week because of the inflammation. They are not dropping 7 pounds of fat. Let's be super clear. They're dropping some inflammation and some fat, but they feel so much better. And that's the bigger thing, because I find people will come in because they're like, I want to lose a little weight, but all of a sudden their joints don't hurt, their skin's cleared up, they don't have the gas and bloating, and they're like, oh no, I'm staying on that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to do all this hard work and not see any results. And if you give them that initial impetus, that little reward right away, they're going to listen and they're going to do whatever you ask them to do at that point.
Yeah, that's so key. It's the funniest part about the Virgin Diet is I'll meet people, they'll go, oh my gosh, I've been on that for years. And like, it's actually a 3-week program. It's it's a 3-week program where you, for at least 3 weeks. Now, ideally, it would be more like 4 weeks. And depending on your symptoms and the severity of your gut permeability, you have to decide how much you really need to. Besides just pulling out the things that could be creating the problems, you're also going through with great healing foods and healing activities. And so, it may be better for you to take that 3 weeks and extend it to 3 months. But at some point in there, you need to go back one by one and connect the dots and go, okay, can I eat maybe some grass-fed yogurt, or does it make me react? Can I eat a pastured egg, or does it make me react? And by the way, John, I see with a lot of people, they can eat a pastured egg, but they go eat those factory, horrible chickens, right? And you are what you ate. And all of a sudden they're like, I can't eat that. I'm like, that's because they've done horrible things to those chickens, soy and GMO corn, and then shot them up with stuff. And yeah, your body reacts. So the real premise of the Virgin Diet is really like a biohacking tool, right? Where you become your own nutrition detective. You take all of these things out that could be like, keeping the fire going in your intestines. You then let everything cool down. You do some healing so that your body's like, okay. And then you go back one by one and you check in and you see how you feel. And the reason I prefer this to testing is, if you pull dairy out and you run a test and, your test says, oh, you're fine with dairy, but you eat dairy and your skin breaks out, or you eat dairy and you get bloated. So what if the test says you're okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what's the most important metric? Isn't it how you feel?
I mean, as awesome as data and technology is, you can only get so much information, especially from these food tests. I find that they are very, very controversial. And
right. They definitely are. And they cost money. And hey, I was like going, well, this doesn't cost money. This is just we're swapping out some foods, and you're probably going to like the foods we swap out for even better. And yes, there's always that controversy with these tests. Are you getting a false positive? Or if you haven't eaten this food for 6 months, you won't see it anyway. Or they do have an application. However, I wouldn't do them first. I would do them along with something like a GI map, a stool test. If at the end of a couple months of going through this, you're still like, I'm not quite where I want to be. All right, let's dig in. Let's do some testing. But first line therapy here is, let's figure out the most common things that are ubiquitous in the diet if you are not very aware, because they put gluten in the silliest places, and dairy. And you're like, why do we have gluten on this potato? Why did we put, like, as you start to, if you go to restaurants and start to order gluten-free and tell them you're celiac, you discover that dumbest places they will put, like, why didn't you just put wheat flour on my steak? Why did you do that? You know,
It's crazy.
right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, some of the people listening right now might be saying, well, that sounds an awful lot like a hypoallergenic, elimination, reintroduction type of diet. How is the virgin diet different than that?
So when I first started looking at these elimination diets, they're more complicated and they had a lot more things on them. And they had things like strawberries and oranges. And what I noticed, I always like to figure out the biggest needle movers. What I noticed when I was working with people is that the majority of people, it was dairy and eggs. And then the next tier was corn, soy, peanuts. I I mean, the only time I'd ever see something like strawberries or oranges if someone was just pan allergic, like they were reacting to everything, which just meant their gut was a mess, right? But for the majority of people, that wasn't the case. It was just a mild situation where they were just on the beginning forefront of starting to react to all of these things. And so that's why I looked at it and go, this is very complicated. And all this rotation and everything else it's so hard, and it doesn't really need to be. Now, when I first did this, the reason I put it together was it took 3 weeks for the test results to come back. So I would have people test their food sensitivities. And I had this time on, they were sitting here going, okay, what should I do? So I would put them on the program. And at the time, I was only pulling out gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, soy, peanuts. And what I would discover 3 weeks later when they came in is they felt so much better. And I was like, why are we even bothering with this other test? Well, let's just use it if we really need to. I started doing it with larger groups of people. And what I discovered was because I hadn't pulled sugar out, guess what they swapped out for? Right? Sugar. They're like, well, I have this gluten-free cupcake. I'm like, oh, stop it. Stop it with the gluten-free junk food. So I realized I had to pull the sugar out because when you really look at the gut microbiome, first of all, fructose will absolutely lead to gut permeability. Like fructose and gluten are the 1-2 punch for making your gut more permeable, right? And then you have the issue with these artificial sweeteners changing the gut microbiome. Artificial sweeteners drive me nuts. Like, I don't understand how they're even allowed. Like, how is this a thing? Right? It's ridiculous. I mean, there's enough out there on them, and there's enough great options like allulose and monk fruit. Why do we need this garbage? But then you look at sugar in general and just the havoc it's wreaking on the gut microbiome. So, and it was funny, I write the virgin diet, the drop 7 foods. Of course, sugar is the 7th one I added in. Now, that's not a food intolerance, right? Sugar is not a food intolerance, but it's creating the problem and changing your gut microbiome. But of course, a couple months out after this, people are like, I can't quit my sugar. And now I genetically do not have a sweet tooth. When I was on Freaky Eaters, we did genetic tests on everybody because we had the weirdest food things going on. And so we were looking at, like, are they a super taster? Do they have a sweet tooth? Are they a sweet taster? And so, I've never had a sweet tooth. I could care less. If you're going to sit there and go, what would you want more of? I'm like, salty. It's like, put some salt on a grass-fed steak and I'm all over it, but like
That's
that, or a cake. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you can have the chocolate layer cake or the big steak. I'm like, the steak every day wins for me. And so I didn't understand the whole sweet tooth thing. It's funny, I'm adopted, and my adopted mom is a crazy sweet tooth person. I was raised with Pop-Tarts and Captain Crunch for breakfast and dessert at lunch and dessert at dinner. And at 12, I rebelled and stopped eating all that stuff. And she was like, it got really upset about that. That was like, I was not participating, right, in the fun. But I just could care less. So I didn't understand the hold that sugar had on people. I love the statement that Dr. Mark Hyman says, that sugar is our number 1 recreational drug of choice. Because when you really look at the impact of sugar, it is clearly a drug. And then we sit there and, have little kids' birthday parties and just drug them out. It's craziness, right? But I went down the sugar rabbit hole because after I wrote the Virgin Diet, people were like, I can't quit sugar. Or they go, it's just honey. Or it's just aspartame. There's no calories. I'm like, okay, we're going to clearly need to dig into this too, so you understand the impact that sugar is having on you. And that is why it's one of the 7. It doesn't create the same type of intolerance or sensitivity that the other 6 do, right? It's hormonal, but it also impacts your gut microbiome to lead to the problem.
Yeah. I mean, I look at sugar just like gas on a fire. It doesn't matter what type of fire you've got, it's going to promote it. And so,
yeah, it's like there's really nothing. I remember as I was writing this, my mom's like, but we need sugar. I'm like, no, actually, like we can totally live without sugar. We can live without carbs. We just, it won't be as fun, but we can, but that is still that prevailing thought. We need sugar. I'm like, no, you don't.
you have to reframe that, that it's a norm that's definitely common in our society today. But I think it's starting to be challenged more and more so now than ever anyways.
I hope so. Like it is, as I'm working now on my next book, I'm really focused on, again, I always look at things and go, how do we give you a quick win? Because again, I'm sure people listening are like, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried they come in very savvy. Like someone who's tuning into this Gut Reset Summit is not a first timer, not their first go round. They know the lingo, they understand the information. They probably have figured out their diagnosis of SIBO or gut dysbiosis of some sort or food intolerance, but they're just not having success in fixing it. And that's why we've got to start to look at these things that have this beautiful snowball effect, like, pulling out these foods and reducing inflammation and getting rid of symptoms and starting to feel better right away. So you go, okay, something good's happening. Adding in healing foods like, bone broth and freshly ground flaxseed meal and apples and things that will help to heal and seal your gut. And then, the thing I'm working on next now is really focusing on protein and having people eat protein first so that I can confirm that they get it in and that they've got satiety. I mean, there's so much focus on these weight loss drugs right now. And I'm like, well, there's other ways to raise GLP-1 and GIP.
Totally.
It's called protein.
And it doesn't, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, it's not Ozempic. So,
yeah, I mean, it's like exercise and protein. They both do it. Let's try that,
So JJ, I get the sense that anyone who's struggling with gut issues, weight issues, will do really well on the virgin diet, but who else could benefit from this?
Yeah. So what I did that was novel and different was I took an elimination diet, simplified it, made it super user-friendly and relevant, and applied it to weight loss. What I didn't expect was people using it in the autoimmune world. And that's what started to happen. And in fact, when we did the Virgin Diet Cookbook, we did a bunch of success stories, and we had people coming in. One gal had basically stopped her psoriatic arthritis, was able to get off all of her different medications. So that's the thing I'm seeing the most of. Is the reality is it's really good for someone with any kind of an autoimmune. It's really good for kids who have any kind of issues with gut dysbiosis. I had one of my sons had a lot of behavioral issues that, we took him to a psychiatrist and in 5 minutes diagnosed him with everything under the sun. And I'm like, okay, we're out. We'll go to Dr. Daniel Amen instead. But he had some issues that definitely got worse with any kind of gluten or dairy or sugar. So a lot of the stuff, it was like he was on the virgin diet before there was a virgin diet, because he was, he was the first virgin diet user. Very funny. So this can be a great thing to use with kids too. And early on when I did this, I had a dietitian attack me on Twitter. And it was before I realized that, if you respond back on Twitter, then it goes to all of your people too, dummy. So she was like, you're going to give people nutrient deficiencies pulling out gluten. And I was like, really? Which nutrient deficiencies are they going to have by pulling out gluten? You explain it to me. So you've got gluten that's now causing issues with your gut lining. It's making your gut more permeable. Now, this is where you're supposed to be able to absorb your nutrients. And you've got something that goes in there, and we know it does. We can measure zonulin to see if this is happening. And this can now impair nutrient absorption. But yet you're telling me that if you stop eating gluten, you will have nutrient deficiencies. I think you've got it backwards.
Yeah, and I'm sure you had a lot of people supporting that conversation. That is an antiquated thought.
Well, just remember, this was 11, 12 years ago. I mean, I have been talking about this for years. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years. And when I very first started, and everything back when I first started was, do not lift weights. If you want to lose weight, you have to do cardio first. In order to lose weight, you must have a 500 calorie deficit. And while calories matter, and I don't want to say they don't, because they do, where they come from counts more. We aren't a bank account, we're a chemistry lab. But if you have energy toxicity, too much healthy foods unhealthy, it's got to go somewhere, right? So you can't just like have a free for all on your macadamia nuts or something like that. But it's been quite a change in this industry, right? I mean, there's been, from the thing of fat's the villain, right? Remember all that? Sugar's fine, fat's the villain. That was the launch of our obesity crisis right then and there. That one, to this whole thing with gluten. Believe me, I got so attacked on this, and I'm like, I'm not telling people to eat gluten-free cupcakes here, people. I'm just telling them to try and take it out and see how they feel. If they feel better, great. I've yet to have someone pull out gluten and not notice the difference who really pulled out gluten.
Right.
Because for a lot of people, like, I pulled it out. I'm like, no, you didn't. I'm looking at your food diary and you did not,
No, it's amazing, especially if you're going to be shopping at grocery stores and eating at restaurants. If you prepare your own food, you're way more ahead of, keeping ahead of the curve on that. But
yeah, but hey, at some point we got to go out. We got to leave the house.
Oh yeah.
It's not 2020.
Yeah.
So we're going out, and it is interesting. It's so much easier now, and even internationally. I will say, we were in Bali this summer, and even they're aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were able to do things. The menus had gluten-free on it. It was a little more challenging in Korea because no one spoke English. So that was a little more challenging. But I'm finding even internationally, it's gotten a lot easier to do this. And a little trick that one of my clients has a personal chef, and the personal chef said, so here's what I'm going to do. And I go, oh, this is the smartest thing. Why didn't I ever think of this? He created a card for my clients. So when they went out to a restaurant, the card said, I am not able to tolerate, and listed the foods. And it was a little card that was laminated that they would give the waiter to give the chef, and all of a sudden, boom, you're fine.
Smart. Yeah, so smart. You've probably seen so many crazy success stories, JJ. Do you have any that are top of mind that you'd like to share?
Well, I think of this one woman, and I mean, this honestly will break your heart a bit, because I remember she couldn't lose weight. She tried everything. Now, I always think when you're trying to lose weight, the very first thing that you should do is do a macro audit, like just for a month, track what you're eating, right? Just so you can really see what's going on and measure it. Because I do find that whole idea that we underestimate what we eat by as much as 40% is true. So, but we had been working on what she was eating. She was exercising. She was sleeping. Like, I've got all these areas that can cause you to gain weight, like stress and thyroid and sex hormones and insulin resistance. And, but she couldn't lose weight. And she went to her doctor. So this was prior to meeting me. She goes to her doctor, and doctor says that you have to lose weight. But for you, losing weight is going to be like getting a huge wheelbarrow, filling it full of bricks, and then getting on a sandy hill and trying to push it up that. Now, the doctor is telling her she has to lose weight, and then tells her that's what's going to be like. I'm like, well, how motivating is that? How motivating possibly could that be? And this woman, what was crazy about this woman is she was the ex-wife of another family. And it was a family where the husband and the wife were obese, but the two kids were morbidly obese. And they'd all gone on the program together. And they'd had now they get rid of all of this, their regular weight, right? And they ping the ex-wife to tell her, who's the wheelbarrow going up the hill, and she loses the weight too. And I just think the process of being able to have this skip from different people, and it was one of the attacks I got on Amazon, which, I don't know if you've written a book, never read your Amazon reviews. It's just not helpful. It will just make you upset with humanity. And this one person was like, this is too simple. I'm like, that's your attack. This is too simple. And, it's like, that was the point.
Yes.
I realized that if we complicate things and give you too much to do, then you'll get into analysis paralysis and you'll do nothing. But if I give you something so simple, you're not going to focus on anything else. Just this, just do this. This is all you're doing for 3 to 4 weeks. Then we'll add other things, but only do this. And that was the thing that happened with this woman. The wheelbarrow up the hill woman was, for the first time ever in the first 7 days, I think she was one of the ones, we had some people that lost 10 to 12 pounds in the first week. And again, that is not, you lose like 2 pounds of fat in a week. She's not losing a bunch of fat. She's just getting rid of some inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that she saw like such a shift in her symptoms so quickly, now she's in. And in fact, the research does show that people who get that kind of jump start will tend to lose more weight and keep it off than the people, even though we know like slow and steady, it doesn't get people engaged, involved. They just give up.
Yeah. And you know what? It's not about perfection. We've got this, thing about being perfect. And if we're not going to be perfect, we don't start. So I say, it's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
You really have to just get away from that analysis paralysis, like you touched on earlier.
That's why we just have to, pick a thing. A couple of years ago during the pandemic, I decided that I was going to finally get into meditating. I have tried and tried and tried, could not turn my brain off, blah, blah, blah. I go to a Dr. Joe Dispenza meditation retreat for 7 days in the pandemic where we're all doing breath work in a room together, 1,200 people.
No mask.
No, you only had to wear the mask till you got to your seat, then you took it off. And what's crazy is no one gets COVID. Totally. Because they raise their vibration, their immune system so high, right? But all I did, like I decided for 6 months, that was my thing. That's what I was going to focus on. I didn't say, I'm going to meditate, then I'm going to start doing bigger hit training. And that's it. And until it got locked in, and it took 6 months to really lock that in. I went in kicking and screaming, like everybody else is off in Zen. And I'm like sitting here, can't break the habit of being myself. But I really think that's an important thing for all of us to think about, is like, just pick a thing. Like you're listening to a summit where there's so much information and so many great things, and you're going to hear something, an idea, and you go, that could resonate with me. That's the one I'm going to go after. And note that I didn't say try, because the minute someone tells me they're going to try something, I know they're not doing it.
Yeah.
Like you don't try it. You say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go through, and for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to keep those foods out. And what I teach people to do is pull out those 7 foods, but you swap them. And that's the important thing, because when I first started taking the foods out and I didn't give people the foods put in, boy, that was bad. Boy, what they managed to swap with. So instead, I teach people simple swaps. You're eating regular yogurt, you have coconut yogurt. Simple, right? You're eating eggs in the morning, have a protein shake. So simple swaps that are generally they're going to like better than what they were eating anyway. And they're going to help them feel good fast. And, see how you feel. But you just get started with one thing. That's it. Not 3 things, not 10 things, one thing. Nail that thing, then you can add the next thing.
And if you were to look at somebody and they're going to look at you and say, I can't do that one thing, what do you tell them? How do you motivate that person? I know that's not going to be many of your types of clients.
Well, here's the thing. Then you've got to make that decision. And I used to work, with a lot of one-on-one clients, and I would have someone come in and they tell me what they wanted to achieve, how much fat they wanted to lose, what kind of muscle they wanted to put in, what they wanted your energy to be like, what they wanted to correct in their, blood labs. And I was like, all right, great. And we design a plan that they agreed to work on. And then if they'd come back, because they had to report in on everything and they weren't doing their plan. Oh, well, this came out, excuse. I have a great mentor who always used to say, so I don't have to, right? And I would look at that, and here's the thing. I'm not a cheerleader at all. And someone actually brought me into Suzanne Summers' stepdaughter to have her be her cheerleader. She had, so she could finally lose weight. She had SIBO and food intolerances. She didn't need a cheerleader. She just needed that stuff fixed, which, she lost 40 pounds, kept it off once we did that.
Amazing.
But, if you have to be the motivator for someone, then the minute you leave, it's like a balloon deflating. It's never going to work. You have to have this internal motivation, this knowing that you're good enough, and this really seeing that loving yourself right now. Right. I think this body positivity, healthy at any size, is really hurting us because no one's saying to hate yourself at any size, but what we are saying is love yourself right now, that you are going to do what it takes to be as healthy as possible for you, whatever that looks like, because we all have our different genetics. Right. And so if someone comes to me and they aren't following that plan that we set out, then we just have to look and go, okay, shall we recreate this so that you're just slowly gaining weight and getting a little bit thicker over time? Because I can create that program too, because that's what you're doing. But ultimately, that internal motivation, that's yours to own. I think the reason people don't have it is because they've tried so many different things. And they just are like, I guess it's just me. And they give up. And that's what breaks my heart, because quite often, you've just been following the wrong set of rules. Like, let's say you wanted to lose weight and you thought, I will just go on a high carb, low fat diet, and you eat a low protein, low fat, high carb diet, and you're starving all the time. And of course, it's not going to work for you, and you're not going to be able to build muscle. And then you think it's you, and it's not you. You just were given the wrong information. And so I think the first thing is to really realize that you can find the answers. We're all different, but you can find the answers, and you're worth finding those answers for, right? And then just commit and go forward. And it's not easy. Like, we all have our off days when things aren't working well. In anything you're doing, whether it's business or personal success, there's no straight line. It's a jagged line. And it's a jagged line, like every hour often, So, right.
I think we've been conditioned to look for that instant fix too. And, I know that's in some situations we can see quick gains, but we have to realize that when it comes to, if it's especially weight loss, you've got to sit down, you've got to settle in, stick to what JJ's talking about, one foot in front of the next, and focus on being, true to yourself, because you're not going to lose that weight quickly and keep it off anyways. I'm sure you've seen
especially with body comp. Yeah. I mean, if you're really doing this correctly, like in the perfect world, if I was the benevolent dictator of the universe, I would not allow anyone to think about losing weight anymore. I would have them focus on improving their body composition, and they cannot go into any kind of caloric restriction until they first increase their protein to at least 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. And they've added in resistance training, so that as they are losing fat, they're holding onto or building muscle. That then will help them improve insulin sensitivity quickly, which you have to have in order to lose fat, because if you're not insulin sensitive, you won't lose fat anyway. And then we can start moving, but then we'll be focusing on different metrics, because we'll be looking at body composition rather than weight, and we'll be focusing on getting strong and powerful rather than, let's face it, and I actually did this on Dr. Phil, I didn't do it, but I watched the contestants do it. If you want to lose weight quickly, what you really want to do is sweat a lot, take diuretics, do long, slow distance cardio, and don't eat. And we had a little contest going, and the winners of this group, there were 2 groups, and the winners were going to get to go to, a really cool spa. I don't remember. I think it was Canyon Ranch. All of them. And they were so close, right? And so we've been monitoring them all the way along, and now it's the day before the final weigh-in. And one group, I find out later, and I could see it because I was monitoring this by body fat, and I could see their total body water had tanked, which is not good. You want that high. And so I'm looking at these weights, and one group won the contest by a half pound overall, where we took all their weights, averaged them, and then it was a half pound difference. What they did the day before was they just moved the whole day. They walked, they jogged, they all did all this long, slow distance cardio. They went into their bathrooms at the hotel. They shoved towels under the door, and they turned up the hot water to steam out their I mean, when you think about it, they didn't drink anything at all, no water, no nothing, didn't eat, and they won. And they devastated their body composition. I was looking at it because they just dehydrated their tissues so badly. Now, if they'd continued that for a week, they would have lost they would have lost substantial muscle mass right alongside it too, but that, like, if you want to lose weight, you can do it very unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Let alone increase the risk of organ failure. We won't go there, but
Yeah. Well, there's that little piece too.
yeah.
Oh, that.
Well, you know what, JJ, I think your insights are incredibly powerful. And, you've really, I think, nailed it down to, some very basic, simple to that Amazon review, but effective tools that people can start to implement right away. And so, I know your books are everywhere. They're in every major bookstore, but where can we find you online, learn more about you?
Simplejjvirgin.com. There you go.
Keep it simple.
Everything's there. Podcasts, Insta, recipes, all sorts of stuff. Like, literally, we churn out so much content. So if anyone tries to ever say, I couldn't afford the book, I'm like, you can get everything on the website that you possibly could need to get started. But buy the book too, because the moment you invest in yourself and your health, magic starts to happen. The healing journey begins, right?
You send that message to the universe that you're ready. You've got to make that investment, no matter how small it is. You got to commit. Yeah, but thanks so much, JJ, for being on the Gut Reset Summit. I know you do a million of these, so I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and I look forward to seeing your next book and seeing you soon.
Thank you.